So it's actually kind of depressing sitting here, the last speaker, listening to all these awful stories and how much damage Erdogan has done in Turkey. You know, the first book I wrote about Turkey was during the 10-year period of democracy, when everybody was looking at Turkey as the example of democracy. President Obama, as you remember, his first trip as president was to speak to the parliament in Ankara, because that was the great hope. And I'm sure a lot of the people that I interviewed, judges, prosecutors, journalists, quite a few were arrested after the coup. And we all know that that was a setup in the sense that the list was made, and it was people were going to get arrested at some point for some reason. You don't arrest a judge in a rural area the day after the coup as being participant. I mean, that list was made for a long time. Well, I think to actually speak to the question, what happened to Erdogan, is that Erdogan was always Erdogan. He was just waiting. He was very patient, very smart, very clever, and he had to get rid of his team one by one. And after he got rid of the team, it was the team that was making the change, and the movement was part of that, of course. All kinds of different groups in Turkey were part of this movement. And as he was able to get more power and get rid of people on the team, President Gül being one of the last ones, of course, then he showed who he was, you know, that he's basically a corrupt, totalitarian person. But you have to, I think, this is my perspective, I may be totally wrong, but I think it's really clear that he's a very good politician. And he can manipulate religion. In my view, he's not religious a bit. You know, but he is very good at manipulating. He's very, very good. He reminds me of the guy in the White House right now. And he respects, right? I mean, why do we have all these religious groups supporting Trump? I mean, this guy is not a Christian by my definition, right? So, I think, if you look at, I think the difference between where we are in the United States and where Turkey is that Turkey never had a culture or history of democracy. It never existed. So what we see in Erdogan is actually going back as a replay of prior regimes. In the United States, we do have that history and culture of democracy, even though it's in danger with Trump. But he doesn't have that ability of absolute power in the sense that Erdogan has been able to use it. I think also that Turkey never had the culture of a legal system, institutional legal system. One of the things when I went to do the book, for the first book, when I interviewed judges and prosecutors, there was an effort, and the European Union invested a lot of money into training judges and lawyers to get them to be an independent institution, because they weren't, up until that point, they weren't, right? They were actually just subsidiary to whoever was in power in Turkey. So the European Union was putting a lot of money in training judges. They held colleges in Turkey. They actually took judges to England to study, because they're building up this independent judiciary. And I think part of this is certainly they're scared Erdogan, because this was a foreign idea that you were going to have independent judges. Independent judges, of course, means that they can make law, they can hold the executive in contempt, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that was the other part of this too, is that Turkey did not have this history. Judges up until this point were just functionaries of whoever the general was in charge, or however the country is being run at that time, right? So, but also, I think, in the sense that this is the hope of Turkey, because it did have this 10 years of experiment, this 10 years of democracy, and people saw it. We saw the press get free, right? We saw the judges actually move towards being independent. You notice that after the coup, that he set up a separate judicial system because he could no longer trust the judges who were being trained. So he set up the separate legal system, which was just basically rubber stamping, people are gonna go to prison. I think the one thing that I saw in the shift that was really dramatic to me was Gezi Park. So in Gezi Park, you saw how President Gül tried to deal with this, right? Sit down with the students and talk. Erdogan at that point was out of the country. I think he was in Tunisia, if I'm not mistaken, some one of the African countries. When he comes back, it's over, right? Everybody's punished. Clampdown. So, and that's the beginning of the marginalization of Gül. And he's the last one in the sense that has that popular support from AKP because Erdogan's basically run everybody out, or the other remaining people have become corrupt as he was. Anyway, that's just my take on it. But I just, these stories are awful. Torture, right? Torture was just beginning to end in that 10-year period. Turkey has an awful history, as you know, of torture. And that was one of the things the European Union was working on changing. And it was just ending, and now it's back. It's back. So, I mean, to me, the hope is you all keeping this going, keeping this struggle going. This is the hope. And the hope is that also that people who have tasted democracy for 10 years will return to it soon. So, thank you.
Thank you.